one of those things where it's relatively easy to learn, but it takes a long time to master. And it takes a good 30 or 40 debates before you can really start feeling super comfortable with your role in the team itself. Okay? And as the whiteboard goes on, you guys will discover that there are 3 different speaking roles that exist in a parliamentary debate team. Okay? A parliamentary debate team is typically 5 people, which are all sort of present during the preparation for the debate. So you're given the topic, you're given an hour to prepare on the topic, and all 5 of you discuss and come up with what you're going to be talking about, right? You're told which side you are, whether you're for that topic or you're against that topic before, and you go in and then for an hour, you are in there deliberating over what you're going to be talking about during the debate itself, okay? And that's what we refer to as prep time, okay? And 5 people are present for that. 5 people go in, only 3 come out, in the sense that only 3 of them can speak. So there's some decisions on, out of the 5, as to whether the topic is on economics, you know more about the subject, you know more about the subject, do I know less about the subject, figuring out who the best person is, who the best 3 people are to speak. And then of course, within the 3 speakers that you choose, each one has a very different role in the debate itself. The way that I best explain it is that the first guy that gets up from your team is there and he's present to present your point of view, and the central theme of your argument, okay, and of the debate itself. The second guy is to reinforce the first guy's points and also to expand on them further, in further detail, with more examples, so on and so forth. And the third guy's job, which is typically what I involve myself in when I'm in a parliamentary debate, is defending our case against everything the opposition has to throw against it. All right? So that consists of 2 parts. If I'm speaking on behalf of a subject like, take a quick example, we had a great debate last year on whether, if you had to choose, whether you choose China or you choose the United States as your ultimate colonial master, okay? Who's running the world? If you had to choose between, or the United States. If you had to choose now between the United States or China running the globe and running global affairs and being the dominant superpower, who would you choose, right? And so obviously one team got up and presented for China, and the other side got up and presented for the United States. And that was what the first 2 speakers really did primarily. But the third speakers then had to do 2 things. They had to defend their own sides. If I was arguing for China, I had to defend China against all the onslaught and attack that had come in from that side as well. And then I had tried to do my best to try and damage their case, to try and disprove about how America is that great and how China is so much better, given what they've said. Okay? I don't want to get into too much detail before, again, I guarantee you this is the most exciting, the most enjoyable, and definitely the most, it's definitely the most intellectually building activity that you have ever been part of in any of your extracurriculars ever during all of your school years. I debated not just in high school, but I went on to the United States and I debated for Northwestern University that had the best policy debating team in the United States at the time. And I debated with them for 3 years. And they were the best 3 years of my life. You're going to meet a whole lot of people from a whole lot of schools during these debating competitions. You're going to make friends on the circuit, and then you guys are just going to keep coming back and back and back and back for more. This is ridiculous. The idea that you can get up, interrupt somebody during the middle of their speech, however impolite it might be, but interrupt them during the middle of their speech, and just give it to them in front of 100 people, 200 people, and nationals it was 800 people. When 800 people are laughing, and you putting somebody else down, trust me, as nice a person as you are, and I'm a real sweetheart, it's a fantastic feeling, knowing that you're right and they're wrong, and you got to prove it in front of 800 people. Okay? And similarly, when somebody gets up and you're confident about what you're talking about, and you accept their question because you know exactly what you're talking about, and you know what you're saying is absolutely bulletproof, and they get up and you make a complete idiot of them by pointing out how they're totally, completely wrong and how they shouldn't have gotten up in the first place, fantastic ego boost, right? You go home right before you go to bed, and often it's moments like that that translate into wins for your team. There's no better feeling than being carried out on the shoulders of others and picking up a nice large piece of silverware. I'm not sure if everybody has seen the trophy for this particular tournament for Rotate. Have you guys not seen the trophy? I don't think they put it up on on the web. You guys ever seen an F1 race? A Formula One racing race? Have you ever seen one of the trophies at the end? I think the trophy's about yay so big. Right? It's about the size of this chair. It's a little smaller maybe. It's named after my father, who was a 3-time All India Pakistan debate champion back in the 1960s and 50s. So it would be nice taking that trophy home, I feel. And all of you are going to get a chance to fight for it. And I will say this. There was a lot of talk last year about how teams that are better prepared and that are more prominent in the parliamentary debating space and have more experience have a much better chance of winning the tournament. Okay? And I just want all of you to know that that is totally, completely untrue, in my opinion. Alright? The topics that we are choosing for this particular tournament are topics that are running through me, and all the ideas are being bounced off me for this tournament. I'm making sure that each and every one of these topics, the credit for coming up with these topics I cannot accept. There's a brilliant guy at AKU who's coming up with topics, but each one is being vetted by me, and I can guarantee you they're all topics where having extensive debating experience doesn't matter one bit. It's all about how good you are on the day. And if you're good on the day, you can see yourselves getting to the semifinals, the finals, the quarterfinals, and even winning it all, even if you've never participated in one of these tournaments before. You will become more familiar with the format as you experience it and as you go to more tournaments, but I can guarantee you, we had several teams that had come to our tournament. AKU ended up winning our tournament, and they're the powerhouses of Karachi, in my abject personal opinion. I think they are some of the best rounded debaters that there are over here. They're not invincible. They've been booted out of several other tournaments over the course of the last 6 months, and we've had teams that have never made a final before, 2 teams that have never made a final before, both in the final of one of the debating championships over the last 6 months, 7 months, right? So we had a brand new winner out of absolutely nowhere. So everybody has a fighting chance, and I just say, if this is your first tournament, do your best to just try and understand the rules, your best performance, of course, and just try and learn by watching other people's debates when you're free. And especially during the knockout rounds, if your team has already exited the tournament, don't leave and just never show up again. Come back to the debate the next day, come back to the final itself, and watch these guys. Because the best debates, I think, I've always felt this way, the best debates are the first 2 rounds of the knockout. The quarterfinals and the semifinals are always the best debates.
Okay? So this is what's called a motion. Okay, it is a topic, but it is really how. So basically, what parliamentary debate is supposed to be about is about issues of contemporary concern. Okay, so real world debate. So in the real world, people talk about and debate and disagree about whether capital punishment should be banned or legalized, right? And so parliamentary debate is supposed to reflect those real world debates. Okay? And so the motion is the way in which that real world debate, or that real world topic, okay, is going to be, this is kind of how it's going to be structured and debated in the context of this parliamentary debate. So to explain to you this way, so for example, the issue could be capital punishment is a bad thing, or capital punishment just generally. But the motion will be, this House believes that capital punishment should be banned. Okay, so motion is a little bit more specific, directed than and you have a first speaker, also known as the Prime Minister. Then you have a second speaker. Okay, and you have a third speaker. And then you have a reply speaker. And the reply speaker is either the first or the second. Okay? On the other side, you have the opposition team. Okay? Which is also called the NEG, but anyway, this is the term that's used in Australia. It's just the opposition team. And the first speaker is called the leader of the opposition. Okay? You have the second, the third, and you have reply. Okay? I understand there are a lot of people who know this, but I have to start from the beginning because there are some people who do not learn this. Okay? Again, reply will be first or second. The speaking sequence is as follows. First speaker, second, third, then the opposition reply, and then the proposition reply. So the debate is opened and closed by the proposition. The proposition is the team that is supporting the motion. So the proposition team in this case would propose that capital punishment should be banned. They are in support of the banning of capital punishment, right? Whereas the opposition team is opposing the proposition that capital punishment should be banned. They don't want capital punishment to be banned. Okay? And the responsibility of the proposition is to give good reasons why capital punishment should be banned. The responsibility of the opposition is to give good reasons why capital punishment should not be banned. Okay? And we'll go into more detail about what good reasons are. It's 8 minutes per speech. Okay? Okay? How many of you know what points of information are? Okay, so a point of information is basically is if, let's say, first proposition is speaking. Members of the opposition are allowed to get up and ask a question, okay, or to make a statement at the speaker who's speaking, okay. And the question is always started off as point of information, sir, or point of information, ma'am, or just point of information or on that point. And on that point, they'll ask a question. Okay? So they will say, for example, let's say the first proposition speaker is going on and on about how capital punishment is a terrible thing. One of the opposition speakers will rise, say point of information, and he will either be accepted or declined. So in this case, the first proposition speaker will say point of information accepted, or go on, and he will get up and say, but what about people who have committed murders many times over? Surely, sir, they deserve to die. And then the proposition speaker will have to deal with that material. So a point of information, points of information are what make this form of debating so interesting, so interactive, so much fun. And they can be given after the first minute and before the 7th minute. Before the 7th minute. So at the first minute, so in counting as you count down. Okay, so speeches are 8 minutes in length. So after 1 minute, the person who's keeping time will either ring a bell once, okay, or clap their hands once, and they'll raise 7 fingers like this. Okay? And once they've raised 7 fingers like this, the other team is then allowed to begin asking points of information. Yes? Okay. Are you B-levels? Okay? And so once is only when there's only 1 minute left, and you hear the clock, you are no longer allowed to ask points of information. You have 1 minute left. When there's only 30 seconds left, usually people do something like this, which means half a minute. And usually in the last 10 seconds, people put up both their hands, then remove one, remove the other, and then clap twice to end at 8 minutes. Okay? It is very important to end at 8 minutes, but it is acceptable to go to 8:15, but you'll probably be penalized if you go over 8:20. Okay? The objective is to time yourself such, yes please come in. Are you A-levels or O-levels? A-levels. A-levels. The objective is to wrap up within 8 minutes. Similarly, the 8-minute speech means an 8-minute speech. It does not mean a 7-minute 15-second speech or a 6-minute 45-second speech. If you do not, if you speak for less than 7 minutes, you are liable to be penalized quite heavily. Okay? Speaking for 7 minutes means you have nothing to say. Okay? So, good timing is usually between 7:50 and 8:10. 7 minutes 50 seconds, 8 minutes 10 seconds. Okay? Good if you continue to get up again and again and again. Okay? For points of information, when the person has already asked you to sit down. That's called barricade. Okay? So let's say that, let me give you an example. So I'm talking. Now you can stand up and I'll say point of information. Okay, so I say decline. Okay, immediately stand up. That's it. And I say decline. Now stand up again. Now that's a bit ridiculous, right? Okay. But on the other hand, if I'm talking, say point, get up, take point of information, decline. Okay. I continue to talk. About 20 seconds later, you get up. Point of information. Okay. Not now. Okay. Sit down. Okay. And maybe about 15 or 20 seconds later, a third person gets up. That's acceptable and I can accept it. Okay, but if they just get up constantly, then they probably don't have anything to say, they're probably just trying to annoy you. Okay? But a good debater should be able to block that out. Okay? So if I'm talking to you, now you can just get up and try to annoy me. So if I'm talking to you, I should just be able to ignore them getting up, and I should just be able to wave them down. Okay? And that you can also wave people down, although that's also a little rude. Okay, but you'll find that a lot with some teams that they'll wave you down. They won't even say declined or not right now or no thanks. Very often you hear no thanks. They'll just make various hand gestures. Okay? So, but points of information are what makes form debating so interesting, so aggressive, so much fun. Okay, but remember, when you are speaking, then the floor is yours. Okay, so I'm speaking right now, the floor is mine. It is up to me to decide whether or not to accept a question that you're asking. Okay, so you want to be aware of that. Points of information should never be longer than 15 seconds. If you go on for longer than 15 seconds, you will be asked to sit down. Okay? Yes.
What will be looking at tags? Our tag will be on the floor.
Yes, you will. But the thing is that according to the rules of parliamentary debating, world school style, you have to accept at least 2 points of information in your speech. And if you don't, you won't be thrown out of the room, but it's a bad thing, and judges will not give you as good marks as you could have done.
But we go to logic time. Our time.
No, you do lose time. Your time continues to go on. So 8 minutes includes your answers to the points of information. You don't get extra time for answering points of information. Okay, so it's in flow. Okay, but if you watch a debate, you should. Unfortunately, I don't have a multimedia projector. Otherwise, I had debates that I could show you. You would be able to see how this is actually done. Right? So it all happens in flow. I'm arguing something, somebody gets up and offers a point of information, I will decline or accept it, and when I accept the point of information, I listen to what the person has to say, and I give a thoughtful response. Okay? But all the while, time keeps ticking down. Is that understood? Okay, yes?
What if you don't have a proper response to that person?
You don't have a proper response to that question? Okay, so again, that's similar to not having something sensible to say, right? Or not having a refutation to an argument, that's put out by the other teams. It's just not a good thing. It does not. I mean, you will be penalized for it in the sense that you will not score very highly if that happens. So let's say you have a point of information that I'm unable to answer, and I go, I don't really know how to answer that. It's not going to look good, right? Yeah. Answer the question and say, here's the answer, but I still don't think that's really relevant. Okay? Or you can say that you can just answer the question with a straight face and continue. Okay, so there are different things that you can do. It depends on how ridiculous a question is. Sometimes you may think the question is ridiculous, but in fact it might really actually be quite pertinent. Okay? Are there any more questions? Yeah. What do you mean by emotion? Okay, again, that's like not giving a good response. In fact, it's worse than not giving a good response. It's better to try to respond. The reason why, the point of information is being asked, and the thing about points of information is that your ability to respond to points of information demonstrates to the judges and the audience how quick you can think on your feet. If you have nothing to say, it's telling the judges and the audience that I'm not very smart, or I don't know what to say. Okay, so what you should do is you should try to respond as intelligently as possible, as quickly as possible. Right? You should not accept more than 3. You should not accept less than 2. You should not accept more than 3. Okay? Are there any limits to how many you should give or offer? The limit is only based on how polite it is to continue barracking, right? So if people just keep jumping up, first of all, they're not going to be able to listen to the person's speech and don't really have anything much to ask. And second of all, it will appear to be being done just to interrupt the speaker rather than to ask a point of information. Right? Any other questions? A lot of these things, actually the best way to understand parliamentary debating is to watch one speech, okay, and and then to hear this lecture. If you've not ever heard a speech, it becomes difficult to explain in a vacuum. Okay? But now just to summarize what I've said so far. This is what's called a motion. Okay? Proposition team supports the motion. Opposition team opposes the motion. Proposition team gives good reasons for why the motion is true. Opposition team tries to give good reasons for why the motion is not true. Okay? The speakers are first speaker, the speaking order is first speaker proposition, first speaker opposition, second speaker proposition, second speaker opposition, third speaker proposition, third speaker opposition, reply opposition, and reply proposition. The first and last speeches in any debate are always the speeches of the proposition. Points of information, speeches are 8 minutes in length, except for reply speeches, which are 4 minutes in length. No points of information can be offered before the first minute or after the 7th minute, and no points of information may be offered during the reply speeches. Okay? That's the high-level summary here. Well, that depends. You should try to be snappy and get rid of it quickly, but maybe it requires a detailed response. Okay? Yeah. No, it's both sides. Both sides. Yes, you can, but usually you don't. Okay. So mechanics have been understood. Okay. Responsibilities of, okay, so there are several different types of debates, okay? This is what is called a belief debate, okay? There's also what is called a change debate, okay? A change debate would be, for example, this house would legalize all drugs. What is the difference between a belief debate and a change debate? In a belief debate, okay, you're only talking about, in a belief debate, what you've got to prove is that there are good practical and moral reasons, okay, or there, as you say, there are ethical and practical imperatives, okay, for this policy, okay. But in a change debate, you also need to give some mechanism for the change, okay, some kind of policy, okay. That's the difference, okay. So this is at an abstract level. This is at a less abstract level, okay. And there could also be a debate. This house would legalize all drugs. We actually have that better one. Just an example. Okay. In this case, there is no policy. Okay. You don't have to propose a policy or a mechanism for the change. In this case, there is a policy, but you can decide the policy. Okay. In this case, you've got to defend this specific policy. Okay. These are 3 different types of debates. Okay? A belief debate, a change debate without a specified policy, in which you've got to specify, you've got to make up a policy yourself. And the third is a change debate in which the policy is specified. Okay? These are 3 basic types. Okay? Of debates. Now, let's understand. So I'm now going to talk about this. I'm actually going to we're going to use 2 topics to illustrate what the responsibilities of each side are and how arguments are meant to be made. Okay? We're going to be 2 topics I'm going to use. One is this house would House supports military, actually this House would intervene militarily to deliver emergency aid in humanitarian crises. Okay? Counseling before issuing couples the marriage license. Actually a real debate topic. And this one is obviously a real debate topic. Okay. This was semi-finals of National 2008. Okay. This was round 1 World School Debating Championships 2008. Okay, this is a prepared topic. This was Pakistan versus Wales. The debates that I coached. And this one was KGS versus LGS 1A1. Just to explain to you. Okay? Okay. So these two, are you guys writing these down or something? Because I'm going to have to rub this board off.
Do you have a pen? I'll be uploading this video.
Let me define a few key terms in this topic. Okay. So, intervene militarily means use armed force. Okay. Humanitarian emergency aid in humanitarian crises. You can say that humanitarian crises mean things like genocide, floods, tsunamis, anything that causes mass human suffering. Okay? And emergency aid means provisions such as food, clothing, tents, medication. Okay? That are which are required on an urgent basis in order to prevent people from dying and suffering in the aftermath of humanitarian crisis. Okay? So you're going to do something like that. Okay? Then you identify, then you set out the interpretation of the topic. Okay? So basically what what our team believes in. Okay? We believe that when a humanitarian crisis occurs, or a humanitarian crisis occurs, rather, it is the first responsibility of the international community to deliver emergency aid to those who need it most. Okay? Regardless of where those people may be, okay, our responsibility is to protect those who are suffering. And regardless of what the government of the country where the humanitarian disaster is taking place thinks, our responsibility as the international community is to deliver humanitarian aid to the people who need it most. Okay? And if we are opposed in any way, we will use armed force to ensure that aid gets to those who need it most. That's the interpretation of the topic. Okay? Then, what you do is that you present a policy. Okay? You say that, for example, the United Nations, under its mandate, which is known as the responsibility to protect, okay, will be responsible for delivering this emergency aid. Okay? And United Nations forces will be those which intervene militarily if emergency aid is in any way blocked by the governments of the countries where the humanitarian crisis is taking place. That's the policy. Okay? Then you say, this is how I'm going to talk to you about. We're going to talk to you about 3 things today. Number 1, yes.
But doesn't that when the opposition stand up and say that currently United Nations Security Council will put that aside?
Yeah, obviously. That's obvious, right?
But that's sort of dependent on that. And issuing that happens.
No, obviously, if that happens, right? That is understood. That in order for the United Nations to act, this is actually one valid, that's interesting to mention that, because let's say that the government needs to do something, anything, okay? In order for the government to do it, its parliament must pass legislation, okay? Right? So, those things are assumed, but yes, you can say that the United Nations Security Council will decide when the humanitarian crisis is genuine and requires intervention. You can add that if you want, but it is assumed. You will not get anybody in a mature parliamentary debate, nobody will stand up and say, but what if the United Nations Security Council does not approve it? Because the assumption is that under these circumstances, the United Nations Security Council would approve the military intervention. Okay, because after all, you're proposing a certain policy under certain circumstances. Okay? Yeah, you had a question? Okay. Right. So what you do is that then you say, I'm going to talk about three things today. Okay. I'm going to talk to you about how terrible humanitarian disasters are, how many people die. Okay. I'm going to tell you about why the international community has a duty to protect those people who are dying. I'm going to tell you about circumstances where that duty might require military intervention. And then finally, I'm going to explain to you why the United Nations carrying out that military intervention is the best possible policy for getting the aid to those who need it most. Okay. My second speaker is going to tell you how, by intervening militarily in these cases, is going to promote human rights across the world. Something along those lines. And then you start. Have you seen this done before? That's what the first speaker will say. Okay. What he will do is that he will go up, he will define the motion, he will define the key terms of the motion, he will tell you what his team stands for, what his team believes in. He will tell you, in this case, for example, he will give an outline of the policy. He will then tell you, and he will then say, I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things. The first thing, as I said, could be that humanitarian crisis is bad. Okay? First premise. Second premise, government or international community has right or duty to intervene. Second premise. Okay? And conclusion is that they should intervene. Okay? And they will intervene in this manner. And this manner is the best manner for them. An independent reason why to support the motion. I.e., a reason that is not dependent on the truth or falsity of the argument proposed by the first speaker. You have a premise? Okay. So, let me give you an example. Okay? A topic like, because it's very often it's very difficult to come up with a completely independent reason to support the motion. But I'll give you a good example. There's a debate about whether public utilities should be owned by private companies. Okay? Which means it is like whether KESC should be privatized. Okay? Now, it is privatized, but I'm just saying generally, right? There are lots of utilities that are not private. Not that. Okay, so the thing is that so the question is that why should public utilities be privatized or should be run by the government? And the first speaker can talk about economics, okay? Whether it's economically better or worse for the government to run these companies or for private companies to run these utilities. And the second speaker can talk about that things like provision of electricity, provision of transport are actually they're not regular consumer goods. Okay, they are basic fundamental rights. So it is the right of the citizens to get electricity, the right of the citizens to get clean drinking water, and therefore they should not be privatized because it is the job of the parliament, okay, to debate how to disburse rights, not the job of private companies' boards. You understand what I'm trying to say? Okay. So what that means is that independent of the economics, of the economic point, okay, it is right and proper for parliaments and governments to deal with issues that involve fundamental rights. And an example could be, in the United Kingdom, there was, the famous double-decker bus in London, the big red bus. Okay? So, for many, many years, the red bus, which is an icon of London, used to be able to jump on and jump off at the back. Okay, there was a kind of like an open back to the bus. Now, the thing is that those buses were phased out. And the reason why they were phased out was not economics. Okay, no private company would have made that decision. But the government made that decision. The reason why they made that decision was because handicapped people could not access those buses. There was no ramp. Okay? And what they said was, that what was debated in Parliament was whether handicapped people make up 2% or 5% or 10% of the population. In any case, of course, they're a very small minority. They have a right to access the bus the same as everybody else. So it is our duty as a government to give people their rights to access public transport, and therefore we must phase this bus out and introduce a new bus which gives handicap access. Yeah.
I have one. When you're interpreting this topic, you talked about, you said that the government has not aligned the aid to pass through, then you use the military to fight the
Of course, that's the only reason why.
You can also interpret it, can you interpret it like this, that you use the military simply to deliver the aid?
Okay. The thing is that, no, that's not a good interpretation. Okay? Because the thing is that when you're intervening militarily, it does not mean that you're using soldiers just to give out aid. It means that you are using the fighting force of the army in order to ensure that aid is given, which means that there is some opposition to aid being given. Okay? And this happens from time to time. Okay? Why? There are two reasons. One is that the government is involved in a genocide or involved in some kind of violence, okay? Or is supporting one of the parties to violence in a civil war, okay? Like in Sudan, okay? Or like in Rwanda. Okay? Number two, the government may not want the international community to be involved in their country, even if people are dying. Okay? So you might have heard of Cyclone Nergis in Burma several years ago. The government did not want the international community to give aid to its people, even though people were dying. And the reason was because Burma is a closed society and it didn't want to open itself up to outside influences. Okay? So what that has been classified by some thinkers as passive genocide, which means people are dying, but you are not letting aid come in to help them. For whatever reason, political reason, whatever reason. So what you're doing is by not letting aid come in, you are actually condemning them to death. That's a passive genocide. So in those cases, should or should not the international community intervene militarily to deliver that aid? That's what it is. Okay? And obviously the opposition will try to say that such a policy will cause more harm than good. And therefore it should be opposed. Are there any questions? You look like you have a question.
In the policy debate, do we have to consider all the hindrances that will come in the implementation of the policy? In the policy debate, do we have to consider all the hindrances that will come in the implementation of the policy?
Okay, so I'll tell you what. In a policy debate, you don't have to get involved in the logistics. Okay? So you don't have to say, the opposition cannot get up and say, the proposition did not tell me how many aircraft carriers will be used. Their policy is independent. They can't say. Okay? But what they can say is that in your policy of military intervention, don't you think that some innocent people will be killed? And don't you therefore think that it's a bad idea? You see what I'm trying to say? But there are other forms of debate, for example, narrative parliamentary debate, for example, some varieties of alternation debate, British parliamentary, in which you have greater liberty to define the motion as proposition. But world schools is not like that. And the reason why world schools is not like that is because world schools is for school children. Okay? Which means that it's supposed to be, so debating is both a game and an educational experience. But at university level it's more of a game, and at school level it needs to be more of an educational experience. Okay? So the objective of world schools is to get students to debate issues as they really are in the real world. Not to manipulate the motion to gain a strategic advantage in the debate. You see what I'm trying to say? Whereas at university level, it's more of a game of wits. Got it? Okay. Okay? These are three things we need to do to change the debate. What could a need be? What do you mean by you need to do something? What? You know, but why do you need to do something?
The current
You need to fix something because it is?
Broken.
What?
Broken.
Right? Okay. There's a need to fix something because it's broken. Okay, so the need means there has got to be a problem. Okay? Because when it isn't broken, you don't fix it. Okay? So the only reason why you would do something is because there's some problem that needs to be addressed.
Like there is a problem of the government blocking the aid from.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, there's a problem of people dying. Right? Something needs to be done. Why? Okay? Child therefore needs to be disciplined. Okay? Now, if the child is, let's say there's some child that is screaming and shouting and making a mess. Okay? Something needs to be done to fix up that child. Right? Now, do you have the right to go and give the child a slap? No. Who has the right to give the child a slap?
Parents.
Okay? So you need to, the actor who's acting, the person who is who is undertaking the action, okay, yes, it needs to have a right to correct the problem. Okay, it needs to be responsible to correct the problem. So there may be a problem. The child might be screaming and shouting, and it doesn't mean that I have the right to go stop the child. Only the parents have got a right to go stop the child. So you need to argue that the actor has a right to act. Okay, so for example, okay, this house would require counseling before issuing couples with a marriage license. The problem could be high divorce rates, unhappy marriages. Okay? The right of the actor to act means you've got to argue the government's got a right to intervene. Okay, so the government has got a duty to society to ensure social stability, or ensure social happiness, or ensure public interest, or something. So you make an argument about the government having the right to act, and then you need to argue that the policy is effective. Okay? Now what that means is that if the government intervenes by requiring counseling, and that isn't an effective policy, then even if it has a right to act, it shouldn't do it. So, for example, if I can say, if a child is making a noise outside, I don't have the right to slap the child, so I'm not justified in slapping the child. The parents have the right to slap the child, okay? But if by slapping the child is only going to scream more, okay, then it's a bad policy, right? So they shouldn't do it, they should do something else, okay? If that's why you have to justify all three, you have to explain all three of these things. You can explain the existence of a problem, explain the existence of a right of the actor to act to solve the problem, and you also have to prove the policy is the most effective policy in light of possible alternatives. Okay? Because whereas the mother might have the right to stop the child, if giving him candy is going to be more effective, then we want the mother to give him candy. Understood? Any questions? Responsibilities of speakers. This is basically, this is like the most important thing in debate. Okay? In any change debate, you've got to demonstrate need, prove right, and prove that your policy is the most effective way of solving the problem. This is the basics of debate. Okay? In fact, it's not only the basis of debating, it's the basics of legislation. Okay? You have to say that there's a need for legislation, there's a right of the government to pass that legislation, okay? And the legislation proposed needs to be the most effective. Okay? In light of other possible alternatives. Okay, speaker roles again. What does the first speaker do? Tell me. Somebody. What does the first speaker do? First, affirmative speaker. Here in the case first. Okay? But the point is not whether you call it a stance or not. The point is that the first speaker needs to say, we stand for this, for these reasons. Okay? You have a question? No? Which school are you from? BSS. BSS. Okay. Beacon is, so, if we were going to use this basic structure of debating for this topic, how would we do it?
The need for issuing rules.
Okay? Right? Need is what? A lot of people are getting divorced, unhappy marriages.
To maintain social happiness.
No. You have to first take the problem, right? Okay.
I don't know
Yeah.
if this would be correct or not.
Which is basically about how the government has got certain rights and duties, okay? And those rights and duties have been given to the government in form of a social contract, okay? So we accept the government has got a monopoly over violence. We accept that the police has the right to arrest people. We accept that the government has got the right to make laws, okay? But that's something we'll discuss in a second session. But one way of doing it, which is very effective, is to make analogies, okay? You don't even have to have a body of theory. What you can say is, look, the government in any case is telling you things like you can't marry underneath a certain age, like 14-year-olds can't get married. The government is already telling you that. The government is already interfering with marriage. In fact, not only that, in order to be married, the government needs to issue people's marriage license. So marriage is clearly not entirely private in the first place. The government is involved anyway. This is simply extending the involvement of the government. Okay? Alright. Policies effective. And then you've just got to explain why counseling is the right way to do it, rather than any other means. Again, that will take us beyond the scope. Okay, what is this first speaker opposition rate? 3 minutes, 30 seconds, 12 minutes. So you need to go to 5. Okay? Third speakers just refute. Yeah, they pick up the major issues of clash the major areas of disagreement, and they talk about them. And they explain why their side won on those areas of disagreement.